What's up, man?
So I'm Bhav, and
Wait, what's your name?
Bhav,
Uh-huh.
Bhav. So not Bob, it's like Bob, but like with the V at the end. So Bhav.
Yeah.
And
Dude,
what
how
I
many
can,
people, you kind of look like a Bob, though. You know what I mean? When I looked at you, I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh, this is Bob. Here we go.
yeah. So I came to talk about being third cultured because I'm originally an Indian, but I've lived 15 or like 14 and a half out of my 19 years outside India, and this is actually the 7th country that I'm living in my life. So yeah,
Dude,
I just
you can have
like,
a seat if you
yeah.
want. It's more comfortable. Yeah, so were you born in India?
I was born in India.
Your
and
parents are Indian?
My parents are fully, so even with my parents, my dad is fully Indian.
Holy crap.
My mom's side of the family is technically Indian, but they were from the Pakistan side of undivided India. So before, when India and Pakistan were all India, my mom's side of the family was from the Pakistan area that migrated to India when the partition happened. So like there's that multicultural aspect there. But other than that, when I was 3, I moved to Australia, to Sydney. And at that point, I was in India and I was young, so I was only speaking Hindi with my parents. But I moved there, I learned English, and like I remember like as a 4 or 5-year-old just being like, like the same thing that happened with my name here. I go to someone, I'm like, I'm Bob. They're like, you're Bob? I'm like, no, I'm Bob. So I remember a lot of times I used to just come home and be like, Mom, why would you name me Bob? Like, you should just name me Joe or Bob or Jack or something.
You could just change your name to Bob. You know what I mean? But wait, go back to third culture, right? So you, was it confusing growing up? Like, did you always call yourself Indian?
So for me, like my parents, even though we've moved around a lot, they've kept a very Indian household in the family at all times. So like even when I've been living in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Dubai, like my parents have always kept speaking to me in Hindi to make sure I remember it. So that's why my Hindi is fluent. My English is good as well because obviously I lived abroad, went to international schools. But yeah, as a child, like a lot of times I was like, why would you name me this? I remember I went to a public school in Sydney in Australia, so everyone had mandatory Bible study every other day of the week, I think, Christian class, and I was raised as a Hindu from my parents, but I was like, why? Like, I wanted to stay with my friends and stay in the Bible group, so normally they would, like, people from other religions would go to the library and study, and like, oftentimes I wouldn't leave, and like, the teacher would call my mom, and she would be like, just so you know, he's in this class, and then my mom would be like, why are you learning about Christianity? And I'm like, because everyone's there, like things like these.
Dude, Jesus saves.
Yeah. So yeah, I would sneak into that class a lot. I would sneak out of the library a lot, and like, like Australia.
Wait, so that actually sounds like a really fun, cool thing.
Yeah.
So for you, growing up in the way that you did,
yeah,
you had some really fun kind of experiences in that way.
Definitely, yeah, and like I was the only, I think definitely in my class, in my grade, in Australia and New Zealand. So when I was like 4 years to like 8 years, I was probably the only Indian or like brown kid. So for me, there was always that feeling of like, especially as a child, I was like, why am I so different to like everyone around me? But then having moved, I moved from Australia to New Zealand to South Africa, similar but also completely different in a way, South African culture. So I learned about a completely different part of the world there. Something that I'm really thankful for is the fact that after South Africa, when I was in grade 2, I moved back to India. Grade 3, I moved back to India for 2 years, and I think that really helped me connect. Like right now, when I go back to India, no one can tell that I've lived abroad, or right now I live in Hong Kong.
Okay, so you live in Hong Kong now?
Yeah, I talked about Hong Kong before, if you remember that.
Yeah.
A long time
So
ago.
what is your, how do they not know, like what are the cues? Like what do you do when you go back to India to blend in?
Like, because of my parents, I speak fluent Hindi, like properly, the slang and stuff. So, and I speak to my grandparents in full Hindi. So when I go back there, I'm just speaking proper Hindi. My parents have always kept that like feeling of an Indian household in my family. So I know a lot about India. I'm very connected with my family.
Yeah.
Okay,
here's my last question, Mom. So do you consider yourself, if I asked you like, hey, if I asked you what your ancestry is, you would say Indian.
Yeah.
But if I asked you, where are you from, what would you say?
I think the answer to that is India. If I had to choose a place more than most, it would be India, but I still don't think that's enough for me to say like I'm fully Indian because I've only lived there 4 out of my 15 years.
Yeah, like you're sort of like you're like, if I say where are you from, you're sort of, I'm from the planet.
Yeah, like 7 countries. You know, I've lived amongst completely white people. I've lived amongst completely black people. I live amongst Asian people now. I've lived amongst brown people. So like, for me in my life, like this is why I wanted to come and talk. I've really reached a point where like when I see someone, the last thing I think about is their race. Like, you know, in terms of like who a person is. Because for me, like I've also always been in an international school. For a lot of my friends, moving to university was, you know, like if they were going abroad from Hong Kong to like the US or the UK. For them, it was like, you know, big thing. They're moving out of school. For me, it was any 2 years of my life because I move after like every 2 or 3 years.
Dude,
so I think,
awesome, man. Cool. Yeah, very cool. Thanks, dude. Bob. Yeah, very cool. How about somebody who's black and white? Who's black and white? Okay, your name.
Miles.
Miles?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's your story? Who's white, who's black, who's what?
So my mom is like 75% white, and her parents are white and black. So.
And your dad?
My dad's black, classifies as black. But he's part Colombian and a little bit Middle Eastern. I'm not 100% sure what.
So how do you refer to yourself?
I classify as African American.
Yeah. And why is that? How do you get to that?
That's kind of like the culture in my family is African American, so like that's kind of like what I grew up with. Because we're not really connected to the other minorities in our family.
And you're not connected to the white side?
No, but yes, not really.
Yeah. So your mom's not really connected to her white side?
Not really.
Yeah? Because, like what?
So her dad kind of like left. So it was just my grandma. So like we're not really connected to the white side.
So do you ever think, how often, because I think about this with Obama, right? Like Obama was half white. Nobody ever calls Obama a white president, right? He's the black president. I'm like, but he's half white. He's actually he has more white than, if he did a DNA test, I'm sure he's more white than black. He might be like 52 white, 48 black, I don't know. But like, no one ever refers to him as a white president, right? So how often do you look in a mirror and have this idea like, wow, I'm also really white?
A lot. My friends kind of like make fun of me that I'm like not as black as them, but
yeah.
So,
but
like,
you look. I mean,
yeah, I look African American.
But genetically speaking, you're much more white than. Genetically speaking, you are more white than your appearance would indicate.
Yes.
Because nobody could tell. Even looking at you, I'm like, nah, I don't see much white at all. But if we were to do a DNA test, it would come out, right?
Yes.
So do people, how are you when you're in a situation and people are talking about white people and it's like they're also kind of talking about you at some level?
I kind of just like back up.
Do you ever defend white people? Do you ever defend us, bro? I mean, us, like you?
I've never been in that situation, though.
Oh, you don't have to be? All right, man. So what's the coolest thing about being you?
That I can, like, switch personalities. Like, I have a white personality, a black personality.
And a Latino personality. What, are you in your white personality now, or your black or Latino one?
My white personality.
That's your white personality?
Yeah.
What is different? What makes it your white personality?
Mostly just how, like, I speak.
Yeah?
So, like...
Oh, duh.
Oh, snap. Yeah.
How would you... Do you speak Spanish?
I do not.
Yeah? All right. Does your dad speak...
He does not.
Yeah?
My grandma does, but not as much. Not really.
All right, man. So listen. Yo, who had a response when he said, yeah, kind of how I speak? Who had a response to that? Yo, what's the response?
I disagree. The way you speak does not make you white or not.
Wait, hold the mic close. What do you say more about that?
I mean, Mary actually spoke on this earlier. She's from State College, and she speaks pretty proper.
Proper?
Just proper English without any like dialect or slang involved. And she was raised by white people, so a lot of people think that's what makes her white, or like that's where it shows through. But I mean, I was raised by two black parents, and I speak exactly like the same way.
Yeah, but if I'm like hanging out with like my African American friends,
Right.
it's like the slang will start to like leak into my conversations.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like if I'm talking to Sam, I won't use slang around him.
But that's not where your whiteness like shows through. You know what I mean? Like,
Where
okay.
do you think whiteness shows through?
I mean, like, it's not. I don't think if it's like any like cultural things, or I don't know how. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not very.
Wait, hang on. Don't say anything more.
Okay.
Bro, where's she from? Don't say. Where's she from?
I have no idea. I assume.
Go ahead, take a guess.
I don't know.
Just given how she speaks, look at her. Where do you think she's from? Look at her face. Come on, man. You should know. I knew this. I knew the answer to this when I first met her.
I have no idea.
Yeah? Where's she from? Ethiopia? Dude, nice. All right. So how do you speak when you're from Ethiopia?
Yeah.
Both your parents.
Yep.
And how do you speak when you have lots of friends who are Ethiopian?
Actually, no. Like more recently, I started having more friends that are Ethiopian, but I also grew up in the like suburbs of Baltimore, like Ellicott City.
Uh-huh.
So growing up, there weren't many Ethiopians in the area.
Yeah, there were.
There weren't many.
There weren't.
No, there was only in my high school, there were 2 other Ethiopians.
What would you say? What would you say is the difference between the primary? I'm just going to ask you this. We're going to step off, right? Talking about in between, because here you are as this Ethiopian American. You have a U.S. passport?
Yeah.
And an Ethiopian passport?
The majority of my life, yes.
Okay, so you are this person who's also living in between these worlds, right? Because when you look at her, you weren't thinking she's African, right? You're thinking she's black, she's African American, she's something, but not African, mm-hmm. right? Okay, so you're living in 2 worlds. How is that for you? Or how does that manifest itself?
I guess culturally, I have my Ethiopian side, the language, all of that. So there isn't that there's a very clear divide in my life where it's okay, my friends from here and everyone I know here, and then my friends from back home or my family or even friends that I have.
What's the divide? So you speak Amharic.
Yeah.
So what's the divide? Because most people don't okay, so imagine you have all these people here who really don't understand what it is to be Ethiopian. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just say Ethiopian, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not even going to say black, because most Ethiopians, if you ask your parents, and if I say, "How? So you're African American?" they probably would say, "No, we're Ethiopian."
Yeah.
Not Ethiopian American, we're Ethiopian, right?
Yeah.
So here you are. People just see you as black, mm-hmm. and you are, no, hang on. I'm not black. I mean, on one hand, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but mm-hmm. I'm saying, imagine how it could be. I'm actually Ethiopian. There's a real, how is that divide? How is it to be in that? Or what's it look
like?
For
me, I do identify as black, but I don't identify as African American. Uh-huh. It's I definitely do specifically say I'm Ethiopian. Mm-hmm. Just because there is those cultural differences, and then on top of that, just ancestry wise and things that people think I can relate on and things like that. I can relate on, I don't know, the black struggle of living in America now, but the whole ancestral history I can't relate on.
Uh-huh. Right.
So there's that. There's times where I'm hungry and I'm only craving Ethiopian, or
yeah. Did you bring me some?
I actually didn't, but after Thanksgiving, my mom promised to make you some.
All right, listen, so here's a question: what is it about being African, being mm-hmm. Ethiopian, but being African in the United States that he wouldn't understand?
So that one's difficult because I recently just got into an argument with another African friend, and it was more so how even other Africans perceive Ethiopians. Mm-hmm. So I just feel the whole Ethiopian experience is a little more different. So I can't really speak on African as a whole in America.
Got you.
I don't think being Ethiopian in America, anyone will. looks at me and says like, "Oh, you're Ethiopian, so you're different."
Yeah.
It's something like I point out or like I have to explain or something like that. So.
Okay, let me ask you, bro. So she, as being Ethiopian, like what are some assumptions that you might make about her? As opposed to if she came up here and said, I'm African American, but she didn't. She's Ethiopian American, so.
I kind of assume she's like more connected with her African side compared to just African Americans.
And what does that mean?
It means she like goes more in depth in their culture, like their food, their style, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely food, man. Have you had Ethiopian food?
I have not.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you should.
There's a good restaurant in Baltimore.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. All right, awesome. Thanks, dude. Thanks. Awesome. Thanks.